Hello friends, welcome to my Sew Along With Me series. Today we're going to be working on Dante's coat from Devil May Cry anime that just dropped. This is going to be kind of a walk along tutorial where I'm going to show you the steps that I did, how I got the different techniques down, and then you can do whatever you would like as you make your own cosplay and modify what I've done or use it as an inspiration. So let's go ahead and get started. As you can see here, I have already kind of skipped the boring parts where I cut out the base pattern that I'm going to be using, and then also pinned all that together, all the boring parts. So we're going to get started here, and while video me is kind of making some adjustments to the pattern, what I would like to do is take you over here and look at the sketch that I have made of the anime coat so we kind of see what we're going to be making in this episode. Alright, so this is basically what Dante's coat looks like in the new anime. I've seen some good breakdowns of the different pieces they pulled out of the various video game costumes to put together, so I'm not going to go into that. But basically what I'm going to be covering a lot of is those shoulder pieces, how we're going to be making those, and then also the side pieces. I have done quilting in my sketch here because I like quilting. That is totally unnecessary. You do not have to do that. It is not accurate to the anime. I just like it. So I have simplified a couple of things here already. First of all, those straps coming down from his jacket are actually attached to the harness that goes around his chest. We're not doing that. I might do it on a later coat, something fancier, but we're not doing that today. That's just very complicated, so we're not doing that. I have also simplified the back shoulder area where the shoulders and the back meet. In a lot of the animation, it kind of hikes up very weirdly before the seam. I have just joined them at the seam for ease of movement, and frankly that makes a lot more sense as someone who actually makes clothing than the way that they've animated it. You can do it more accurately if you like. It is totally up to you. I've decided to do it this way for ease and just because it makes more sense as someone who sews a lot. And then the final alteration I have done is add a back seam down the middle of the back. He does not have one in his coat in the anime, so if you want to, the only seams that seem to be accurate in the anime are those side seams, and that seems to be how the coat is tailored, but it's also very fitted to his back, which is not exactly practical or easy, so for ease I have added a back seam right down the middle of the back. Again, you can do that or not, it is your choice, but for ease that is what I have done. If you are looking for a good base pattern, one thing I will say is this coat absolutely reminded me of when I was making Dabi's coat, his original coat from the anime and the manga, and it was very similar with the length of the sleeves, the length of the coat, the split in the back, and just how the collar itself was made. So if you are able to either have a Dabi pattern from something you've previously made or find one to adapt, that is a great pattern to start to get you the shape of Dante's coat, and then just start adding pieces onto it to make it Dante rather than Dabi. Okay, it looks like little video me is still working on those changes and adaptations to that basic coat pattern, so I'm going to go ahead and cut to already having made those changes and show you guys kind of where I'm going to put the extra seams and how I'm going to change this basic coat, which again are very similar to Dabi's coat, and this is what you'll be doing to make it look more like Dante's coat. Okay, so to start, we've got that front side seam, which is going underneath the shoulders. And then you can see the shoulder piece itself I have joined at the sleeve seam and then kind of made an extra seam around the sleeve top. And then coming around the back here, again, the shoulder seam joins at the shoulders right there. And then actually this part right here I'm touching right now, that curves downward a little bit. It's kind of like a big U. And then down here, the side seams are not straight across. I started making it straight across, you can see, and then I had to alter it. They actually kind of curve downward, which is very interesting. But then the seam just goes straight down once it takes that corner. And that's, you can cut that as a single piece, or you can do it as an overlay, which is what I'm gonna do. And that's basically what we're doing. And then this little diamond piece on the back that I'm not showing you here on the video is, we're gonna cut that separately and install it later. So don't worry about that right now. I'll show you a lot better picture of that when we get to it. These here are the sleeve cuffs, so I wanted to show what these look like because they're kind of a fun shape. So I did have to extend mine a little bit, but as you can see, that top edges here that I'm pointing to, these kind of wing upwards, so the bottom is flat and then the top kind of curves upward a little bit, and it is identical either side if you fold it in half. I know my pattern is not, but it should be. It will be when I cut it. The pattern almost kind of looks like a bow tie to me, with that bottom edge being flat, if that's a way to think of it to kind of get the shape correct. Alrighty, I want to give you guys a closer look at the overlay on the shoulder. Now this will meet to the front of the overlay and the back of the overlay that goes on the shoulders. Now the front overlay that goes on the jacket's actually a little shorter than the one that goes on the back, so because of that the sleeve overlay is not even, so you probably want to mark the front of your pattern just real quick. I'm just gonna mark on it quick with some marker and draw a little arrow so I know which side is the front, so once I cut those pieces I can put them in the right spots. Alright, now we get to look at all the complicated pieces. So you can see the top, it's all labeled. You've got the top two overlay pieces there, which that back is definitely curved on the back overlay. And then you have the side overlays. You can see the tops of those side overlays are a little wonky shaped, but that's kind of canon. And then both sides of those side overlays, they just go straight down to the very bottom edge. And again, you can cut those as overlays or you can cut them as seam pieces, up to you. I want to show you the shape here of the back is actually pretty straight, and then that side piece kind of widens out from the hip. It almost just flares out, and those are your sides. And then just to give you a quick look at the materials that I worked with for this coat, give you an idea of what to look for or whatever. This main material, this is the main coat. This is just a polyester that I got at Michael's craft store. It remarkably matched this duck canvas that I have. I ordered from a store online. I will drop the link in the video description. As you can see, the textures are a little different, but the color is very similar. The duck canvas I'm just going to use for the side pieces to give it a little reinforcing. And then this is a pleather, a very soft pleather. It's like a flannel-backed pleather that I got at Joann Fabrics, RIP. And that's what I'm going to be using for Dante's coat. Just a quick look here at the process of cutting things out, which is really boring, so I'm not going to go into depth to it. And then here is a look at all the different pieces all cut out and spread out, so you can kind of see what I've cut and how I've done it. Alrighty, we're going to skip ahead to already having done all the sewing and basting for the coat. I'm going to assume that you kind of know how to sew a coat together, so I've already done the pressing and stitching on the side seams of the coat, just depending on if the stitching is going to be seen or not. And then I've also done the sides and pressed the sides flat. As you can see, the tops are a little wonky. They don't lay flat. That's because of the way that the body of the coat spreads around the shoulders. And then these are all the various and sundry other pieces. Okay, so quick look at the sleeves. I've already sewn them together and pressed the seams flat. These are the sleeve cuffs. I've already sewn them together, pressed them flat. There's a layer of interfacing in there, and I have also basted those bottom edges closed. And then this is the collar of my coat. Inside the edges there's a layer of interfacing, and then I have done some wiring on the top edges on the corner of the collar so I can flip them out. And then these are, of course, the overlays of the coat, and I have already gone ahead and done all of the basting. I've put them on top of a layer of duck canvas just to give them a little more stability. And then I'm going to be doing edging with all these extra pieces of the fabric here. We're going to start with making the shoulder overlay pieces out of the pleather. And I'm going to show you kind of step by step how I made them. You can use that as inspiration or follow along. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut a couple strips of craft foam. I used the 3mm craft foam. I used to get it at Joann's, but you can get it at Michael's or Amazon. Any craft store is going to hold it. What we're going to be doing is cutting a strip to go over the top of those shoulder overlay pieces, as you can see. So the very first thing we're going to do is kind of measure from side to side on the shoulder overlay pieces and see how long it's going to be. I think mine was a little bit over 7 inches, 8, and then I wanted to add an extra couple of inches so that when the shoulder bends, as you can see what I'm doing right now is kind of giving an approximation of when that piece is bent, I have enough space that that strap won't be pulling it tight, it'll bend naturally. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is we're going to take our craft foam, I'm using scraps, and then I am going to be taking my ruler here, my clear ruler. I think I cut the straps at about 1 inch wide, and then I'm just going to be marking it. I'm not cutting with this device, I am just marking it. This is just tweezers I like to use to mark my foam before I cut them, and kind of mark the length that I want, and then I will take my scissors and cut it out. And now we have 2 matching pieces, one for either shoulder. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of cut that shorter strap, which is used for the buckle attached to the middle strap. So we're going to go ahead and kind of measure from that middle strap an approximation of how long we want that second shorter strap that's going to have the buckle on it. Alright, and then we're going to basically repeat the same process that we did for the longer strap with the ruler and the tweezer. Here's a closer look at the tweezers that I am using. They're just a fine point tweezer from Femore, if they come to focus. Alright, and then to make that kind of rounded edge on the top of the strap, I'm going to be using this tool. It's from Tandy Leather. It is called a, hold on, I have a close-up. It is called a Design Template Multi-Shape. Very professional name, but again, it is from Tandy Leather, and it just has a bunch of round shape templates in it, so you can use them to make at curved edges, which is wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and trace that, and then cut it, and then there we go. That's our little strappy piece. So I'm going to trace that individual piece with the tweezers again. So there, that's what it looks like with it's just traced, and then I'm going to go ahead and cut it out so I have 2 pieces. Alright, so there we go. We have our 2 straps and our 2 half straps that the buckles are going to go on. The buckles themselves are from Tandy Leather. They are just little strap keepers. I believe they're called like loop pieces. Hold on, I have a close-up here. They are called strap loops or belt keepers also. So those are from Tandy Leather. Alright, so now we're actually going to sew the leather onto these foam straps. So I have taken little snippets from my foam scraps that I showed in the last clip or a couple clips ago and just made little pieces for the straps here. And then what I am going to be doing is wrapping that pleather around the foam and sewing it on. And you can, if you don't want to sew, you can definitely, I've seen people glue, hot glue, or just fabric glue onto foam before. I'm going to be stitching because I love the way that stitching looks on pleather and foam. It's just a very beautiful look to me, and it's also very canonical. As someone that works with leather, this is something you would do with leather as well. So I like to use a longer running stitch so it looks a little bit more like an actual leather stitch, but I'm just going to go ahead and zip these up real quick. Okay, I'm going to run this part at normal motion so you can kind of see in real time what I'm doing to get that curve around the curve in the foam. And basically, just you're sewing really slowly, and every couple steps picking up that presser foot and folding over the leather so you get a nice smooth edge with the leather. the pleather. I would definitely recommend like trying this on a scrap piece of foam a couple of times if you've never done this technique. It is pretty tricky. It works really well. You just want to be very careful and very conscientious of where you put your fingers while you're sewing and how tightly you're pulling that pleather against the foam to get that smooth edge. Alright, if you've done this correctly, there's going to be a bunch of little gathers up at the front underneath that round bit of your leather, and you're going to want to trim those off as closely as you can. So I'll be doing that in the next clip, right after I sew this. Okay, so as promised, we are going to be trimming off the excess pleather off the foam pieces now. So especially around those rounded tops of the shorter ones, you're going to want to trim the bunched and gathered pleather there because it will make it lay a lot flatter, which is really important so it looks like an actual piece of leather. And then I like to cut these sides down a little bit so they just lay flatter as well. Okay, so from here we're going to take those two large pieces that we're going to be attaching the straps to, and we're going to take the little strap keepers out from their bags. Those are again from Tandy Leather, and they're just going to kind of be pressure fit on top of the shorter straps, and they will eventually, the shorter straps will be hand stitched down so the keepers can't slide off, but right now they're just going to be pressure fit on there. They should fit pretty exactly because the keepers are about the same size as the straps. Okay, now that we've got those keepers on there, we're going to take the longer straps and kind of figure out where we want to position those shorter straps. They're going to roughly be in the middle. Mine were a little off center just because of the shape of the shoulder overlay. And then I'm going to take these to the machine and I'm just going to stitch right along where those stitch lines on the other strap is. And they're going to be attached, and that's going to be pretty simple. So I'm going to go do that right now. Alright, so pretty simple, all attached. Now, when these things are laying flat, as you can see, the foam is kind of popping up. That's because when they are folded and rounded like I was doing just now, the foam actually takes more dimension to go around something than fabric does, so you have to make sure that you're not just laying that foam flat on top of those pieces and just sewing it flat, because then it will kind of buckle the pieces because the foam needs more room to bend when you're putting it on top of a sleeve than fabric itself does. From here, I'm going to go ahead and use some other scraps and just stitch some piping around the bottom edge. You can call it bias or piping. I'm just going to make that out of scrap pieces of the pleather, and I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm kind of showing you in depth this step because this is a step we're going to repeat for a lot of the other pieces on Dante's shoulders. So basically what you're going to be doing is sewing an extra strip of pleather around the bottom. So basically you're just going to take a strip, you're going to sew it kind of upside down with that bottom edge along the bottom of whatever piece you're doing here. I have already started the piping on the front overlay, and then you're just going to flip it over and we're going to hand tack that edge down so it's going to be nice and piped. I can hand tack this one because I am using pleather, but if I were using any other type of fabric, or if you're going to be using a type of fabric that frays a lot, you want to make sure that these strips are a little wider so you can finish the edges before hand tacking them so they don't fray out on you. I'm going to go ahead and hand tack these down while I am not recording because otherwise it would be a 7-hour video. Alright, and I am back. I spent a couple hours hand tacking things, but I just want to show you what this looks like real quick. So if we flip the pieces over, you can see where I have hand tacked, which means hand stitch, down those pieces so they stay. This technique works because these pieces are going to be an overlay. They're going to be flush against other fabric. If it was going to be shown, we'd have to do an invisible stitch underneath, and that's a whole nother process. But right now I want to focus on this big back piece, which is pretty scary because if you look at the way that Dante's is, there's actually this diamond cutout that I've been tracing, and we're going to go ahead, we're going to cut that piece out, and then we're going to do a bunch of top stitching to show the different pieces on Dante's back plate. So we're going to go ahead and kind of mark that up and see what it looks like. What I'm going to be using here is chalk to mark on the pleather. I use chalk because it washes off of pleather. You can also use Taylor's chalk, or they also make like heat disappearing markers now, which are pretty cool. I've not worked with those, but I know a lot of people who really like them. So just a quick reminder, what we're doing here is this is the shape. We're going to be cutting out this diamond piece, and then these curved pieces here on Dante's back plate, we're going to be top stitching those. So I'm going to go ahead and mark those out in chalk so I can do all of that right now. I did find, because this piece is a mirror image, it's easy to fold it in half, and then you just have to draw one side and not both sides, and that's very, very easy to do. So that's what I did here. And as you can see, I'm freehanding this. You don't have to freehand it. You can do whatever mathematical equation works for you, but this is basically the shape you are going for. And then we're going to be taking some scissors and just cutting out that diamond shape. And yes, I am avoiding working with pins because I don't want to leave holes in my pleather. But I want to show you another technique you can do working with pleather. So right now, instead of drawing an identical set of lines on that other piece, I'm going to trace the piece of pleather that already has those chalk lines, and I'm going to put excess chalk on there to make sure that there's just a lot there and it's just kind of compacted and all piled up. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to fold the piece in half so that the right sides are together, the pleather sides are together, and I'm going to pat it. So the excess chalk that's on that one side is going to come off on the other side, and you're going to already have it mirrored there, and it's going to be even and correct and perfect. And I'm going to go over it again with more chalk just so that it's there and I can see it. But that's a very quick, very easy technique to get your pattern mirrored on a piece of pleather. And just to make sure we are all on the same page, this is what your chalk pieces that we're going to be top stitching should look like. There should be two seam lines. One kind of arches up and over, and then the other one follows that bottom curve of the piece itself. We're also going to go ahead and do that bottom bias piping piece just like on the other two pieces already. Alrighty, and if you're following along, this is roughly what your pieces should look like right now. So we've already top stitched this back plate with all those seam lines, and we have done the piping or seam bias for that as well. And now we're going to work on that little diamond piece that goes in the bottom center. Alrighty, this piece is a little bit wonky because if you look at the references, while the rest of the overlay pieces have that piping, this diamond does not. So what we're actually going to do is make two pieces. I've done one out of duck canvas and the other one pleather, and I have stitched them together, and we're going to just turn it and make it look nice and finish it like you would a normal piece of fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and clip the corners pretty close and then turn it. You want to make sure you clip the corners so that, especially on points, that you get a nice point instead of a bunchy point that looks more round and crinkly and stuff. Yeah, and we're just gonna turn it. Just like anything with a lining. I do use a turning stick for the point. Chopsticks work nice for those, or they make actual turning sticks as well. And that's what it looks like. Alright, I want to take a second here and talk about the ring that's on the back of Dante's coat. This is what I am using. This is a resin cast I made for a different project many years ago, so I've just had this laying around and I'm going to be using it. It is not accurate to the anime. It looks like Dante actually has like a clip back there. I've decided to use a ring because a clip is not really practical for actual real life applications. If you're going to use a clip, there's definitely places you can find some. If you're looking for a ring, you can find maybe something. I know Tandy Leather has a lot of rings that are larger size. They're meant for like horse harnesses. You can browse through their website, or you might be able to find just a large ring or like a round belt buckle and deconstruct that to use on Amazon or something. Alright, so this is what your top overlay should look like when it's all constructed before we attach it. So here's where the ring goes. It goes right underneath that point. The point's going to get tacked down, and that's kind of how the ring is attached. But I've just painted this with spray paint and then kind of weathered it up with a little black wash. This diamond piece, as you can see, I've finished it up. I've just done some top stitching on the edge that's going to go underneath the rest of the point, and then I have very carefully done some stitchings just to get it to lay flat because I cannot press it because it's pleather. If you're gonna do this, you should definitely use color matching thread. I am just lazy, but it's gonna get tucked right up underneath that piece, and that's what everything should look like right now. So we're making good progress. Alright, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna make these little strips that connect Dante's overlay. They go underneath the top overlay to underneath the bottom side overlays. These pieces here I'm showing you right now are the leather straps that I'm going to be using for the bottom of those strips. And again, canonically, these connect to his harness that goes over his chest, and I am not messing with that. We're not doing that in this tutorial video, so if you want to, this would be the step where you get to figure that out on your own. Good luck. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to start making straps for those things, harness pieces I guess we'll call them, and we're going to use the same techniques to make those straps with the foam and the pleather wrapped over it as we did for the straps on the shoulder. One thing you do want to do for these straps is make sure that they are wide enough for like the lower black harness pieces that are coming out of them. So that's what I'm doing here right now is I'm measuring those. I'm using actual leather strips, and then I'm making sure that the straps that I'm cutting are wide enough for them because I'll have to cut buttonholes into them and make them go through. So make sure that you take that into account whatever you end up using for those harness bits at the end of the straps, whether it's leather, pleather, or you want to use foam or something. Just make sure that you accommodate the width for your straps and your harness pieces. So again, this is just the 3mm craft foam, and I am using the trace method before I cut it, and then also using that curve template from Tandy Leather to get the curve at the top, and we should have 4 of them at the end, and that's what they should look like. And we're just going to sew these the exact same way that we sewed those curved straps before for the sleeves. Okay, here's the arguably tricky part. So these are buttonholes that we're going to put in the straps so that we can insert those lower harness bits into them. As you can see, I've done a couple of test buttonholes off screen to make sure I got the width correct. We're going to be doing these manually. I know a lot of people's machines have automatic buttonholers, but I found it easier to do manually so you can control the width a little bit better. And you're going to be using a satin stitch and then just kind of turning it when you get to each end so you create your own individual buttonhole, and then we will cut them open and actually insert the straps after that. Alrighty, now that we have cut the buttonholes open and kind of inserted those harness strips in there, this is kind of what we're looking at. So I have inserted the harness strips and then actually attached them at the top, just top stitched them right through, and then that part where they're top stitched, that line is actually going to be where they are tucked under the overlay, so you can't see that line, but that's going to keep the strap from sliding out. And then they are going to be manually sewn underneath that overlay piece, this thing that I'm holding right now. Okay, my biggest note on these strip pieces here with the harness strips, make sure you make them extra long, because mine, I thought I made them long enough and I was just barely able to tuck them underneath my side overlay. So make sure you make them longer than you think you're going to need, because you can always cut them off later, but you can't necessarily make them longer once you've cut them. So I would say make them longer than you think you need, especially because you've got to sew them down at the top so they don't, you know, slide out of the strap that's holding the harness piece, and then you can cut them off later if you need to. I'm going to go ahead and sew this overlay down to my jacket and then cut to video of having it sewn down and show you what I did. I think it'll be easier to explain. So here we are with everything already sewn down. So basically what I have done is I have basted the overlay onto the jacket around the collar seams and the top of the shoulder seams. The back is actually still open. You can see I can fold it up. That's because I have to still insert that diamond piece and also the back straps. And it's essentially the same in the front. It's not quite sewn down yet. I still have an open pocket there to insert those straps. So that's going to be the next step, to get those pieces inserted. Okay, so here we are. Basically, you're just going to be kind of measuring where you want these back pieces to go. The back straps that connect to the harness pieces are on a little bit of an angle. They kind of angle towards the armpit a little bit. So however you want to place those that you feel comfortable. And then I did a lot of measuring to make sure that they were accurate, and then I did pin them down. I actually used pins to pin them down underneath the overlay, and I will be taking them to the machine to machine stitch that top in there and then attach the overlay down and tack it down after that. As far as those front strips are concerned, the biggest problem I had with those was trying to get them even in the center of the pieces and then making sure that they stuck out the same amount. So just make sure you're measuring there so everything's even, and you should be all set. And then just a reminder, when you're sewing those straps down, make sure you're folding that overlay up and away so you're not sewing the straps onto the overlay, so that you can lay the overlay back over top of the straps, and we will tack that down later. Alright, so here's what it looks like now. So just a quick look at what I've done here. You can see I've done that top stitching on the underside on those straps, and then I have pinned down the tops of the overlays, that's the word I'm looking for, and I'm going to be hand tacking that down, doing invisible stitching so that it won't show and it'll lay flush. And then as far as this little diamond goes, I am going to be stitching down the diamond and the ring separately, and then I'll stitch down the point of the diamond over that. But if you flip up this back piece here, you can see that I have the diamond pinned. I'm probably going to go stitch that, the top parts there that are pinned down on the machine, and then come back here and stitch down the ring. I'm going to do that with fishing wire because it's a lot stronger than thread, and then I will go back to thread to stitch down the point of the diamond over top of the fishing wire so it doesn't show. Okay, if you are following along, hopefully we are all at the same point here, and the jacket should be wearable with that overlay stitched down. At this point in time, you can stitch that back overlay down to the invisible stitching just like the front, and just have everything attached and looking good, and the rings on there, and all those harness straps are on there, and everything's ready to go. So at this point, we are ready to attach sleeves and the last couple straps that go over the sleeves and everything. So here we go. Okay, here's a quick look at what we are doing for the sleeves. So I have that top overlay pinned down. I'm only going to pin it and sew it at the top. Not going to do around the sleeve because that'll give you more movement for the sleeve. And then as far as the bottom cuff, you're going to install that and then do your lining and then press everything upwards so it looks real nice. And yeah, that should be a sleeve for you. So we're going to go ahead and sew that on and attach it to the jacket. So quick look here at where the shoulder seams join. You can see that the piping joins and the seams match very nicely, and the same thing in the back on both sides actually. So the next thing we're going to be doing is making some more straps, just like the ones on the sleeve overlay, that are going to cover that shoulder seam and go down and be attached underneath our tiny little straps that have the buckles on them. And then we'll make some straps that go over those with studs on them, and that should be just about everything. So, oh, and we will also be adding the collar. Okay, for these straps, we're going to be doing the same technique that we've done with the other straps, where you're going to measure from underneath that middle of that strap that goes around the shoulder overlay, right along that seam up to where your collar's going to be. Make sure you get that length correct, maybe add an inch or two. It's better to have it too long, you can cut it down. It's also worth noting that the straps that go over Dante's shoulder along that shoulder seam are a little bit wider than the short little straps that have the buckle on them, because you can see the strap on either side of that buckle. So if you want to make it a little bit wider, that choice is up to you. But once you've figured all that measurements out, we're basically just going to take the foam and mark everything out and cut it again, and then we'll be wrapping it up in the pleather just like all the other straps. At this point, I'm going to assume that you remember how to do that, so I'm going to go ahead and cut to having already made those straps so I can show you how to attach them. Okay, so hopefully we are all here now, and we're going to be taking these straps, and they are going to be kind of inserted underneath that shorter strap that's going to have the buckle that is attached to the strap that goes around the shoulder overlay, and we are going to attach these longer straps directly underneath those straps, directly to the longer strap that goes around the shoulder overlay. See, just like that. And then we are going to be kind of pulling them, not pulling, but you want to make sure it's snug so that it doesn't pop up, because you want it to cover over that shoulder seam. So essentially, when you're looking at it canonically, there's no shoulder seams on Dante's jacket, and that's because that strap covers it. So you don't want it loose so that you see the shoulder seams, but you also don't want it too tight so that you are pulling the sleeves and can't move around, have to walk around, you know, not being able to move your arms, like we all know what cosplay is. And then as you can see here, I put some pins right along the stitch lines of this because I'm going to hand stitch it down, and I just needed to keep it in place for a little bit. I do want to note, granted my shoulders are a little wonky, but just with the positioning of the way that the straps on the sleeves were and the way that the shoulder seam was, these straps are not 50% like on either side of the shoulder seam. It's about 20% on one side and then 80% on the other, but it still covers that shoulder seam. So whatever you need to do, it doesn't have to be perfectly identical and even on either side of the shoulder seam, as long as you get it covered. And then this is eventually where our little buckle keeper is gonna go. I took it off for this clip because it was easier, and we're just gonna top stitch it down once we get the other strap stitched. So that's pretty simple. For our top stitching, we're just going to be using the same thread we sewed these straps with, and then we're going to be doing straight through the holes that are already there from sewing on the machine, and just doing about every other hole, just because it doesn't need to necessarily hold it down tight, but just to hold it there and blend in. And that's what we're going to be doing for both those straps. So alright, and we are cutting right to these last straps, and I want to apologize. Apparently my brain skipped out on me and I didn't film the process of making these, but it's going to be just like the other straps we've done, and this one's going to go right over the middle of where that other strap, the shoulder strap that we just did. And then you're going to cut your foam using the rounded edges and then cover it just like we've done on everything else. And this is the strap that has those 3 little studs in it, so this is my favorite strap. So what I'm going to be using for those are these rivets. These are from Tandy Leather. They are called double cap rivets because they're extra wide. They come in different colors and different sizes. This is the sizing side, the little stud end. So this is the smallest size that they come in. Otherwise, they're a little bit longer to fit more stuff in there. But we're just going to pop them right in there. I'm going to be cutting the holes using a hole punch. This one is very old. I do not know. It was my mother's before I inherited it, so I'm not really sure where it's from. But I'm going to be using this to just punch holes in there, and then I will be sticking those little rivets in there and popping them close and then setting them with a rivet setter. So let's go ahead and do that. So here I am marking out the spaces for those rivets. I'm just pressing the top of the caps into the pleather. Because it's pleather, it's kind of leaving a little bit of a mark, and that's how I know where to push the hole punch. And then again, because it's pleather, the hole punch isn't going all the way through, so I'm having to take my scissors and just kind of clip a little bit of the edges where it's not cutting quite through and everything's cut through there. And then I have holes in my little straps, so I'm going to take these over to set with my rivet setter now. And I'm gonna apologize again here, folks. My neighbors are all out mowing their lawns today. I guess I missed a memo on what lawn day is, but if you're hearing a little bit of buzzing in the background, that's what's going on here. finally the long-awaited rivet setter. So these are basically the tools I'm going to be using. That big black thing on the floor is a pounding mat, so I don't ruin my floor. And then you have the anvil, which is that little round thing on top of the pounding mat right now. And then the bar, that's the big long thing in my hand. So for the rivets, I'm just going to be taking the long pieces and putting them through the back, and then taking the caps and snapping them on the front. And then I will be taking all of those pieces and setting them on the anvil and pounding them down so they're connected, and you just pound them flat, and that's all it is to set a rivet. It's very simple. If you do not have rivets or don't want to be working with rivets, you can always stick to the tried and true cosplay method of using the googly eyes that have been spray painted. That always works. There are also things from Tandy Leather that are called spot sets. I don't exactly know why they call them that, but essentially they are domed. They look like rivet caps, but they have spikes on the bottom side, and you push them through leather or pleather, whatever you're setting them into, and then you fold the spikes in so that they can't pull out of the fabric. And those are a little easier to work with, and you don't require as many tools as an anvil. So those are some options to use if you do not have rivets or don't want to be working with them. And the very last step for these shoulder pieces is to hand stitch those riveted straps down. They are about halfway between the shoulder and the collar seam, and we're just going to hand stitch them just like we did the other straps that we hand stitched. I've also already added the collar to my jacket, so you can go ahead and do that at this point, because then we're going to be all done with everything above the shoulders. And hopefully we are all at the same point here, and congratulations, your shoulders and collar should be all done, and this is what we should be looking at right now. In this video I did go back and I took my airbrush and I just traced along those two back seams that we top stitched just to make them a little darker so they popped at a distance. So if that's something you want to do, you can use an airbrush or a marker or really anything to darken those seams. And in this next section, we're going to go ahead and start making those side overlays. So hopefully you've sewn your pieces together. If not, this is the time to go ahead and do that and press them flat. And then I'm going to start by quilting them, which is a step that is entirely unnecessary and you do not have to do, but I'm going to go ahead and do that real fast. Cutting my video here, so these are all quilted now, which again, you definitely do not have to do this. They are not quilted in the anime. It's just a look that I like to do. So we're going to start putting the edge on them. I have decided to do it in that matching pleather to give it a little bit more pop, so it matches the shoulders. We're going to do the same technique for the piping that we did on the edge of the shoulders, so I'm going to sew it down with the bottom edge matching the edge of the material and then flip it and hand stitch it. And this is what it should look like when it's done. So again, we're sewing that material, the piping, on upside down with the edge matching the edge of the material, and then just flipping it over so the right side is out and tucking it under, and then hand tacking it down. It is quite a bit of work, so I didn't want to show it on the video because again, I don't want this video to be 7 hours long, but this is what it should look like when you're all done. This is 3 different pieces for each side, so you've got the 2 long pieces on either side, and then the top piece is a separate piece. And we are not doing any piping on the bottom because that's actually going on the very bottom of the coat, and canonically there is no piping down there. Alright, and our next step is going to be pinning those side overlays onto the actual sides of the jacket. It should look something like this when you're got it all pinned on there before you stitch it on. I'm not gonna lie, this was pretty difficult. This was like probably the most difficult part for me because of the flare of the jacket itself around that armhole made it a little difficult to match up and get everything even. So hopefully that will be more easy for you guys than it was for me. But from here we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna hand tack everything down, just kind of invisible stitch it down. If you are not wanting to hand stitch, you can definitely take a machine and run a stitch right along the inside of that piping, so it's not on top of the piping but just inside the piping around the edge of the entire side overlay so that you don't have to hand stitch it down. But I'm gonna go ahead and hand stitch it down off camera because again, that will just take me forever and I don't want this video to be that long. So I will catch up with you guys when we've got these all tacked down. Everything tacked down and all good to go. From here, our next step is going to be working on the belt and belt loops because Dante has those even though he never uses them. So I'm going to show you how I made the belt loops, and roughly they're going to go like right behind your hip bones on either side. Okay, so the belt loops are just fabric, two sides that I've stitched together and then turned and top stitched. The top stitching does seem to be canon. These ones are made out of duck canvas, so it's just a little sturdier. Not that I use them, but they're made out of duck canvas, and I'm just gonna go stitch them down to the jacket just like a normal pair of belt loops. What I think I failed to mention at the beginning of this video is that I crunched this jacket out in 3 days. So I did forget to film how I made the actual belt, but basically it is just 2 layers of fabric sewn together and then top stitched all the way around. The buckle is from Tandy Leather. The tongue hole on the buckle, I just did a round buttonhole and stuck it through and then just stitched it down. So what I'm gonna do now is I am actually attaching the belt directly to the belt loop, so you can see I have it pinned here. So I'm actually gonna stitch that down, hand tack it down so that the belt doesn't pull out, fall away. We all know the story how belts just slide out and disappear at cons, so I don't want that to happen. So I'm actually going to be stitching this one down. Hand tacking this down straight through the already existing stitch lines so it won't show. And the very last thing we're going to be doing here is finally installing that lining and then turning it and pressing it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and I will see you guys with our finished coats in a minute. Alright, congratulations for making it to the end of this So Long With Me video, and hopefully you've created a beautiful coat or at least been inspired about how to make your own Dante coat. So if you use this tutorial, I would love to hear about it. Go ahead and tag me on social media. If you have enjoyed this video, please let me know. Drop a comment below, and you guys know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed, share with a friend, and I will see you in the next video. Maybe I will actually make some cannon straps to go with Dante's coat and a new shirt for him by the time we get to the next video. But thank you all for tagging along with me, for sewing along with me. Good luck with your sewing endeavors, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!